Got it that time. Okay. Okay. So here's where we're starting at. Basically, this lecture covers 5.6 to 5.7, labor, wages, and unions. Notice the strength through connection. There's global unions, and this is showing people on picket lines with picket signs. We call it picket lines because it looks like a fence. All right, the big questions. What are the basic principles of supply and demand in the labor market? Basically, it's like, remember when we worked towards equilibrium with price with supply and demand? We had those graphs. It works the same way with labor. Supply and demand work to get a beneficial amount of labor in the marketplace, and it kind of happens automatically. What are the 4 categories of jobs? 4 categories of jobs are unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, and professional. Those are the ones that you're going to need to know. Jobs, labor, synonyms. What is the status of wage discrimination in the US today? In brief, there's less wage discrimination than there used to be, but wage discrimination continues. All right, hope everyone got that. I'm double checking my attendance. No one was absent, so yeah, at least according to what I see. Let's double check. Maybe one person's absent. All right, at some point I'll check. I'll figure it out. Okay. Final big question is, what are labor unions? Labor unions are groups of workers trying to bargain collectively. How does collective bargaining work? Well, basically, the union group and the employer group sit down and try to negotiate key issues. Working hours, wages, safety, all these kind of things. Supply and demand in the labor market. The higher the wage rate, the smaller the quantity of labor demanded by firms and government. There's only so much demand for the top-ranked litigators in America, top lawyers, or the top-ranked heart surgeons, because the cost is high. Because to get that training and skill takes a lot of doing. Labor. So go into your notes and add the word demand into the blank. Then go to the next note. Labor supply. As wages increase, the quantity of labor supplied also increases. So write in the word supplied. It should make sense. As people can make more money in a job, people want that job more. Because if you can make more money, it's good for you. Final issue here, equilibrium wage. This is when the wage rate produces neither an excess supply of workers nor an excess demand for workers. It's the perfect wage to get the right amount of supply and demand fulfilled. Go ahead and write in equilibrium. Looks like equilibrium price, work with supply and demand in an earlier unit. These are child laborers. That's a problem that eventually got fixed. Let's talk about the effects of wage. Here's a hypothetical. A new restaurant opens in town and they offer cooks a higher wage. Woohoo, good for the cooks. Anything to add? Higher. And higher. What happens? Well, so the other restaurants don't lose all their cooks. They're going to raise their wages for cooks too, because there's only so many good cooks out there. So what's going to happen? To pay for those wage increases, the cost of the food's going to go up. And all the restaurants are going to raise their prices, not just in the new restaurant, but in all restaurants in town, so they can cover their increased labor costs. And as the price of the meals goes up, the demand for meals goes down. Consumers will want less of them if the price gets too high. So as the price of meals increases, how much people want go down. By the way, I chose SMAC Pi because I used to teach English, and I had students describe their ideal date. And invariably, I got a description of snack pie over and over again. So that's why I put snack pie in the slideshow. And I also thought it was cool that there's pizza with grapes in it. I never heard of that before. Anyway, wages and skill levels. Wages will vary according to your skill and education. If you have a lot of skill and education, you tend to make higher wages. You have no skill or no education, you tend to make lower wages. Anywhere in between will vary the rate of education and wages. All right, let's see if there's anything to add. I think wages in note 40. Wages vary according to skill and education. Yeah, vary means change. Jobs can be categorized in 4 groups. Unskilled labor, where you have no special skills, just standard skills that all successful people have. Waiters, janitors, etc., will fall into this category. So, is it unskilled labor? I was a waiter for a while. My grandfather was a janitor, so I mean no offense here, for sure. One thing I learned as a waiter was this: people are surprised when you can listen successfully. How do I know this is true? I know this is true because when I listened, people were surprised. People would only be surprised that I can listen if they're not used to people listening. You know what I mean? And that's what I learned the most about being a waiter. People are not used to people listening to them, which I found shocking and kind of annoying that they were surprised that I could listen. But I could listen. And what I learned was listening is a skill that everyone should have, but not everyone does. That's what I learned. And that's been reinforced as a teacher, by the way. But I do see students that can listen, and I see many that cannot. That's why I'm such a stickler on following directions. You see, that's a part of where that comes from. Not trying to make your life better. Because you know what happened when they offered someone to be a bartender? Who they offered it to? This guy. And you know who makes more money? The bartender. So something I did was right. I don't know. Anyway, that's a little bit more skill than waiting because you need to know the drinks, but it's not crazy skill. Semi-skilled labor. These require some minimum skills and education. Think of a forklift operator. Think of, oh, I don't know. So we're writing in minimal. A lifeguard. You need some training, but you don't need to train your whole life. A weekend or two, and you get your lifeguard certificate or forklift operator or whatever. I learned how to operate a forklift in the morning. We were moving this one job, and the guy says, okay, this one makes it goes up and down. This other stick makes it tilt. You might need to slide the tongs in and out to fit in the certain pallets. Here's the gas, here's the brake, and you get a tight turning radius, but you got to watch the front because of the forklifts. And don't put too much weight on, you'll tip. Okay. And after a morning of operating it, by the afternoon, I was good. So I don't know. Some skill, but not a crazy amount of skill. Though I couldn't operate it as well as someone that was doing it every day. Skilled labor, special skills, training. You're talking mechanics and plumbers. Okay, something welding. It takes some skill, but not crazy training to get good at. Some plumbing I can handle, some mechanic work I can handle. I can change the tire, and I could change my oil. Back when cars didn't require computers to get plugged into, now every car is plugged into, so I can't even do that. And back when you had big American cars, it was easier to work on cars. The most craziest thing I did was change the starter. That was about it. All right. Next, professional labor. These are advanced skills in education. A doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, okay, but probably more like an accountant. So we're talking advanced skills. So write in advanced. The blank. These are the people that get paid the most because they had to do the most to get training. All right, let's go to the next one. Wage discrimination. There are laws that prevent wage discrimination. But Smith, you told us earlier that wage discrimination still happens. I know. Just because something is against the law doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? So there's that. One of the things that happens is men and women, white and black, white and Latino, they get paid differently for the same work. It's against the law, but it happens. It happens because it's hard to prove that it's because of the gender, it's because of the race or color that the difference in pay is occurring. It is not right, but it keeps happening. At the same time, it's less bad than it used to be, but it's still bad because it should be the same. Okay. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 said that males and females in the same workplace doing the same job should get the same pay, but it never really happened. The Title VII Act, which is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, states that wage discrimination is banned based on race, sex, color, religion, or nationality, and yet it kept happening. In this case, when they say sex, they mean gender. I don't know why they don't say gender, but they mean gender. And in sex, though, because that's how it's written in the law. Wage discrimination. Pay levels for women, even to this day, women still earn about 75% of men's earnings. Go ahead and write 75% in, and then think about why. Why is this happening? Any theories? If they're doing the exact same job, they should get the exact same pay. My wife and I, we're both teachers in Lodi Unified, just like the Winterhalters are both teachers. And they get paid and we get paid based on our experience and our education. Boom, there's a box. So our pay is exactly equal. That's what it should be, based on your experience. That's what it's supposed to be. But in most jobs, it's not like that. Mostly, I would be getting paid more than my wife, or Mr. Winterhalter getting paid more than his wife. Is that right? No, but it keeps happening. You want to know why it keeps happening? Do you know what excuses employers used to give? Does anybody know? No? Let me tell you what they said. And it's total garbage. All right? They said that men have to support their families, so they need higher wages. I'm the son of a single mother. When my mom was working, she was supporting us. My dad had a stroke and was out of the picture by the time I was 16. So he wasn't supporting anything. There's no woman I know that works that isn't, at least in part, helping to support her family. I know there's some women like that just have these jobs, but most women that work are supporting their families. And so that excuse that men need to support their families and women don't, it's nonsense. And if you ever hear it, tell someone that's nonsense. All adults need to support their family, even if that means just themselves, right? Right? So there's no excuse if you're doing the same work that one person should be getting paid more than the other based on male, female, based on white, black, based on Hispanic, white. None of that should matter. And yet it keeps mattering. Does it matter a little less than it used to? Yeah. But does that make it still fair? No. So there's a growing movement to publish all earnings so people know. This is across the board too, by the way. It's in acting, it's in directing, it's in, oh, I don't know, corporations, CEOs, CFOs, same person, less, less, less. Moving on. Next note. Pay levels for minorities, racial minorities tend to earn lower pay than white men. True. Another instance. So add in lower. blank. This shows you racism isn't over. When I was teaching a few years ago, someone said, all this race talks, man, what are we doing civil rights unit for in US history? Racism's over. I said, it is? Then why is a Latino woman getting 59 cents on the dollar for the same work as a white man? That tells me racism isn't over and sexism isn't over. You need to recognize that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. You dig? Everyone hearing me? That's my evidence. I look at evidence. And then I make my valuation. And I say, if it's not right, that ain't right. And if people aren't good enough, good people don't say it's not right, it's not going to change. Right? So it needs to change. All right, where were we? Oh, glass ceiling. This is not a reference to Roald Dahl and his elevator. No, this means that there's this down low barrier for women and people of color to get the big chair, become the boss of the bosses, become CEO, CFO, COO, to get the good job. Why? Because those people are going to hire people more like them. Let's say a woman becomes in charge of Apple and she needs to appoint her successor or her protege. Maybe she goes with the woman too. Maybe it's a Hispanic woman. Maybe she goes with a Hispanic woman to be her protege. But if it's a white man, maybe they're more likely to go with the white guy. You know what I mean? Even though that should have nothing to do with nothing. And yet it does. At least in the NFL, they're encouraging teams to hire there's some incentives for interviewing and hiring African American coaches. Even though they're the majority of the players, they're not the majority of the coaches. So that's a thing, too. All right. So what do we need to add? From minorities, from advancement. So you basically don't get the big chair. I used to use all kinds of excuses. They're like, oh, well, Kathy would have got the raise if only she had showed up to the golf functions on every month. Well, we did a lot of our business. Or Kathy would have got it if she was part of the tennis club. Well, it was all males there. Or they'd be cracking joke about women. And so it'd be awkward for Kathy, you know? And so that kind of thing was going on for years too. And so try to see it, you know, when it's out there. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, your task here is to watch each video clip on the history of labor unions, then comment as directed. What you're supposed to respond to is which video helped you understand unions most and why. So, as you're watching, take a little notes on the side and then type that note in as to why you liked one video over the other. Altogether, this should take no more than 8 minutes. Any questions? Oh, do you see where the links are for the video? They're in blue on the slide. I added them into the notes, but I just did that. So it won't be hot linked in the notes. You'll have to click on the slide. Someone click on the first one. Does that first hot link work? Emma, Narissa? Nod your head if it does. Narissa, I see you nodding. Emma, is it working for you? Okay, your 8 minutes starts now. Are there any questions? It's about 6.5 minutes of clips. That extra minute and a half is enough for you to take the note down too. And for me to double check attendance. All right, your 8 minutes starts now. Here we go. Hopefully you came up with some decent answer. Labor unions. This is an organization of workers that tries to improve working conditions, wages, and benefits for its members. We have 15 minutes to go and kind of quite a bit of work to continue. Okay. So that answer should be written, Jesus, in your slideshow notes. That's why I sent you the link. And you should be seeing me kind of bounce to it if I was sharing my screen. On note 44, you should be adding improve. Labor unions are trying to improve things for workers. There was an Amazon employees trying to be certified as a union in Arkansas. I never did figure out what happened. But that was a real cutting case because Amazon has really pushed its employees not to form unions. And so they don't really make that much based on how hard they work and how much they're stressed out, as well as the injury rate. They should get a fair rate. And labor unions would help them get a fairer rate. But then, Amazon doesn't want that. So they keep pushing hard because they want to pay as little as possible because that's good for Amazon, but not necessarily good for Amazonian worker. Amazon worker? Not Amazon. I don't know. Too much Wonder Woman in my life. Sorry. All right. Unions are responsible for great improvements in workers' lives in the early 1900s. The 40-hour weekday, the 8-hour workday, having weekends off, that was new. And it was because of unions that it happened. Abuses such as feather bedding and sometimes it'd be organized crime that would get involved in unions, kind of undercut union movement and made it look bad. Feather bedding is when you preserve unnecessary jobs, and changing times have put into question whether unions are still needed because child labor has been ended. But feather bedding was this process where unions would get jobs that weren't even needed anymore to continue. You ever seen trains? You've seen trains, right? Go through town. Well, there's always someone in the caboose, and historically, that's because the person in the caboose, there was a rear brake that they would hit in an emergency. But now, the engineer up front can manage his own rear brake from the front. So the caboose person is really not necessary anymore, except for kind of security for people jumping on the trains, or if someone runs into the train, then they could have someone in the front and the back. The trains can be super long. I mean, like hundreds of feet, a couple hundred feet, or I don't know, a couple football fields. So they can be pretty long. So anyway, that's the classic feather bedding case where you have someone in the caboose, even though someone in the caboose is not essential anymore. Today, less than 14% of U.S. workers belong to a labor union. This slideshow was probably made a while ago. It's probably less than that now. So, but go ahead and put that number in anyway. 11%. 11 or 14? 14. Now let's go to the next slide. Labor force trends. The union movement has taken shape over the course of more than a century. It really started with the big monopolies in the late 1800s to try to curb them. And in 1935, they got their rights formalized in the Wagner Act. And the Labor Relations Act, workers finally got the right to organize and required firms to bargain in good faith with unions. Before that, firms could kind of do whatever they wanted to destroy the union. So let's write in 1800s. Right to organize, that means form a union without having any consequence, like getting fired. Required firms to bargain in good faith. That doesn't mean bargaining in good faith always happens. There's a negotiation I know about currently wherein the employer at bargaining tables has done the following. Here's the offer, take it or leave it. That ain't bargaining in good faith. Are employers still doing this? Vote I Unified? Yes, they are. Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to say that. Sorry. Strike that from the record. You didn't hear that. But they're doing that. They're saying, here's the offer, take it or leave it. And then they say they're bargaining. If they really want to, bargain in good faith, things would go a lot smoother. And the union wouldn't be rejecting their offers. Everyone wants to be treated with respect. Everyone. And they should be. And that means negotiating and bargaining fairly. That's it. All right, moving on. Even though I didn't really say that because I'm not supposed to. All right, more trends. Blue collar versus white collar workers. Blue collar workers are industrial jobs, often working in factory. See the mechanic with the blue collar? These are traditionally union jobs. So right in factories on note 46. We got to get to 50, so we need to pick it up just a hair. White collar workers. These are professional jobs who often earn salaries. These tend to be office jobs, and they're traditionally non-union. So write in salaries. The trend in the last 30 years, especially, jobs in the US are shifting to more white collar jobs, especially in high technology fields. There's more of these people that are white collar than the blue collar ones in America. So write in technology. To the notes. Next slide. There's also a trend of declining membership in unions. And this has really grown since the 1950s. One of the reasons why this is so is the so-called right to work laws. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 allows states to pass laws banning mandatory union membership for a job. So let's say it was a Teamster job or a teaching job. And traditionally, these were union jobs. A new employee doesn't have to join the union and they could still benefit from the union. Now, that's kind of messed up because when you're negotiating, you're negotiating for everyone. So if one person's not paying the fees and they put it on everyone else has to pay more fees to keep the union going. Even though that person is also benefiting from the union, higher wages, better working conditions, hours, etc. It's kind of, it should be an all for one attitude. All right, next. Economic trends. Unions are strongest with industrial jobs, blue collar, but these jobs are in decline in America. There's less manufacturing. There's less automaking jobs. There's just less of them. Why? It's cheaper to do those jobs elsewhere. So firms are offshoring, taking those jobs overseas. They're outsourcing, taking parts of that job overseas. And some people say this final thing. The decline in unions is because government and the union has already achieved its main goal, which was to end child labor and to have a reasonable 40-hour work week. So what do we need to write in? Government. So like the traditional goal, 40-hour work week, 8-hour day. That's been achieved, no child labor. Would agree that's true, but that none of those things would have been possible but for the union. All right, hopefully you're good. Let's go to the next one. Union membership in the US. Even in the last 20 years of the 20th century, it went from like 20% to like 13, 14%. And today, and in 2012, it was 11.2, which is going down and down and down and down. This is because there's more service jobs and manufacturing jobs. It just shows the trend of the whole economy. Let's talk about collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a union's effort to get the best wage and working conditions and hours for their employees. Do you like vacation? Do you like not having to work 7 days a week? Do you like not having to work 14 hours a day? Then you should like unions because they make those things happen. And because the union made that standard, now people expect that to have a weekend off, to be able to go see grandma on Christmas, even if she's across the country. Okay, so collective bargaining is a labor negotiating process, and when it's working right, both sides are giving and taking. It's a real collaborative effort. What do they want to negotiate? The main thing is higher wages for the union. You know what employers want to play? They don't want to play higher wages, even when they can afford it. Some school districts, I don't know, one you might be familiar with without naming names, has an $80+ million reserve fund. For what? For what? What do they need that much money for? You know who needs that money? Myself and everyone in our community. Our healthcare costs went up $1,500 a year. And the state issued COLA. State issued money to pass on to state employees, teachers. But instead of giving that out, the local group, the school district, took that money and said, we're going to put it into the general fund. They don't really need it. But yet we do need it, because I just told you the cost went up, right? That's what they mean by regulating for inflation. When you regulate for inflation, as cost goes up, you get more money allocated. But if that doesn't happen, the real return on income is less. All right, let's speed this up. Working conditions. That was our 2-minute warning. Safety, comfort, and workplace issues. So write in safety. What was I supposed to write in on the one before? And raises and benefits. That's healthcare. That's like the main one. And that's contentious because healthcare costs keep going up. Job security. Another primary goal is to not get your employees fired without some kind of process. All right, let's go to the last one. Strikes and settlements. Strikes are organized work stoppages designed to pressure management to address union demands. This hurts both workers and the firm. How does it hurt the worker, the employer? Because they're not getting the work done because the employees are on strike. How does it hurt the employees? They're not getting paid when they're on strike. Mediation. This is when a third party, a neutral negotiator called a mediator, is called in to try to find an acceptable solution. That solution is non-binding, though. It's a suggestion. Usually it goes into effect, but not always. Third way to settle things when you get to impasse is arbitration. If mediation fails, talks can go to arbitration, where a third party reviews a case and makes a legally binding decision for both sides. And that's it on these notes. And it's not 12:10 yet, so I don't know why someone left, but someone left. Your homework, finish this quiz on your own. Today, I'm not going to do it with you. I want to see if you can do it. One of the 3 or 4 should be reasonable. If you have any questions at the start of class tomorrow, ask me, and then you can do the reading. Are there any questions? Did you learn something today? Did I say a little too much? Yeah. Do I care? Not really. Because I didn't say anything that wasn't true. And it's not on the public record already. So, even though, and it's relevant to what we're learning. And when you're studying things, the more you make it specific to the real world, the easier it is to remember. So, in part, I wanted you to know what's going on, but in part, I just want you to learn and understand how unions work in the real world. Everybody cool? Don't cry for me. I'm doing all right. I just got a recumbent bike, so I can't be doing that bad. All right, more stairs.